Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Amalgamated Academy's Remembrance Day Assembly.
Bon matin à tous et bienvenue à l'Assemblée du jour du souvenir de Amalgamated Academy.
As we begin, please stand for the singing of O Canada.
We would now like to welcome our principal, Mr. Barrett, to bring his message of remembrance.
Legionnaires and all members of the Amalgamated Academy school community, I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for this act of remembrance. Although we cannot do it in person, we feel that it is extremely important to recognize those who have sacrificed so much so that we can enjoy our freedom today. Normally, the Remembrance Day ceremony plays a major role in remembrance and has since 1931. Every year, at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, we gather in memorial parks, community halls, workplaces, schools, and homes to stand in honor of those who have fallen. Together, we observe a moment of silence to mark the sacrifice of the many who have fallen in the service of their country and to acknowledge the courage of those who still serve. On November 11th, we ask that you reflect and remember. 2021 marks the 100th anniversary of the Remembrance Poppy in Canada. Madame Anna Guerin, later christened the Poppy Lady from France, who was inspired by John McCrae's In Flanders Fields, had an idea: to adopt the distribution of the poppy on Armistice Day as a way to raise money for veterans' needs and to remember those who had given their lives during the First World War. In July of 1921, the Great War Veterans Association, which in 1925 would unify with other veterans groups to form the Canadian Legion, adopted the poppy as the flower of remembrance. Since then, the Legion and its members have upheld this tradition of remembrance, and it is for this reason that we continue to wear the poppy as a symbol of Remembrance Day. Today, I am wearing the 100th anniversary pin, which is reminiscent of the first Remembrance Poppy that was distributed after the First World War. As always, our goal is to ensure that our students realize the importance of the sacrifices made. There are numerous discussions and lessons taught leading up to Remembrance Day and pieces of work submitted demonstrating our students' understanding. I would like to congratulate all students on the exceptional pieces of work they did for the Royal Canadian Legion's poem, poster, and literary contest. Your work indicates that you truly do understand why Remembrance Day is so important. In advance, I would like to extend a special thank you to all those who contributed to making this virtual ceremony possible. Thank you to all staff and volunteers who put a lot of hard work into organizing today's ceremony, especially Mr. Morgan, Miss Crowley, and Miss Delahunty. I would like to thank Mr. Jim Populus for giving us the rights to perform his music in our Remembrance Day ceremony. I would like to thank Mr. Ross Petton for the message, our grade 6 students and teachers for leading our ceremony and for the wonderful performances. And thank you to Neil Quinlan for the last post. Again, thank you to everyone for sharing in this remembrance, and may you all continue to remember. Thank you.
Throughout our assembly today, Class 6-2 will present their Hero Minutes. These short segments will introduce us to some of the many Newfoundland soldiers who served in the war. Gordon Campbell Eaton was born in St. John's, Newfoundland. He was a captain in World War II.
Gordon had fought in World War II. Gordon served from 1940 to 1945, making him 25 years old when he left the British Army, and 20 when he joined the Army. Gordon have successfully lived in his fights and battles.
In World War II, he became a commander. He was a father of 6. After World War II, he did a career of building and heavy construction. During World War II, Eaton served in the Royal Artillery 116 Field Regiment, Royal Army in Britain. Gordon Campbell served, number was 9,700, making him second on the list. The first of 400 men during the service. He was awarded the Military Cross Medal.
Class 6-3 will now tell us about the poem In Flanders Field and the man who wrote it, John McCrae.
Following the presentation, we will present O Shem to Honor and In Flanders Fields.
The poem In Flanders Fields was written by Canadian Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae more than 100 years ago on May 3, 1915. He was a doctor treating wounded soldiers during the Second Battle of Ypres in Belgium during World War I. In this area of southern Belgium in northern France, the battlefield where the fighting took place was called Flanders Field.
A close friend of McCrae's, Alexis Helmer, was killed during the fighting. He was so upset by the loss of his friend and all the other soldiers who were killed. He was inspired to write down his thoughts right after he buried his friend.
When Officer McCrae sat down on the back of an ambulance, he looked across the field of small white crosses where they have buried the dead. McCrae noticed that bright red poppies were still growing amongst the white grave markers.
The fields were muddy and worn from the fighting that was still going on, but the flowers continued to bloom.
His poem describes these poppies, the crosses, and the sounds of gun shooting, and the dead soldiers. The poem talks about bravery, loss, hope, and the promise of the future victory, especially if those still living continue to fight for those who have died trying.
Officer McCrae's poem has become the most well-known war poem ever written. It is read at countless war memorial ceremonies around the world.
McCrae died from pneumonia in 1918, just 3 days after he wrote the poem in France at the age of 45. He never knew how important his poem would be, and this is what he wrote.
O Shampdaner le coquelicot, sans parsi me de l'eau en l'eau, auprès de quoi et dans l'espace, les alouettes devenues las. Mais l'antler chant aussi filamment des obissaires. Nous sommes morts, nous qui s'engenant le vie encore. À nos parents, à nos amis, c'est nous qui reposons ici. Au Shampdaner, à vous, Jean Debussy, à vous de porter l'oriflamme et de garder au fond d'armes le goût de vivre en liberté. Acceptez le défi sinon le coquelicot s'en fanera. Au Shampdaner.
Oh, sleep in peace where poppies grow, the torches your falling hand lets go. What caught by us again held high, a beacon light in Flanders sky, that dims the stars to those below. You are our dead, you held the foe, and ere the poppies cease to blow, we'll prove our faith in you who lie in Flanders field. Oh, rest in peace we quickly go, to you who bravely died and know. In other fields was heard the cry, from freedom's cause of you who lie. So still asleep where poppies grow, in Flanders field. As rumblings sound to and fro, the lightning flashes sky aglow. The mighty host appears in high, above the din of battle cry. Scarce heard amidst the gun below, our fearless hearts who fight the foe, and guard the place where poppies grow. O sleep in peace, all you who lie in Flanders field, and still the poppies gently blow between the crosses row on row. The larks still bravely soaring high are singing now their lullaby to you who sleep where poppies grow in Flanders field.
The name of our soldier is Matthew Brazel. Matthew's hometown is in Remembrance Bay.
Matthew's rank was Lance Corporal. Matthew served in World War I.
Matthew had been working on Bell Island as a miner when World War I broke out, and at the age of 20 decided to enlist in the Newfoundland Regiment.
Matthew Brazel came home from battle and died in February 1958, age 63.
Matthew was awarded a military medal for his bravery under heavy machine gun fire in full view of an enemy.
Class 6-3 will now share the history of why we wear a poppy for Remembrance Day.
In 1918, after World War I, upon reading his poem in a magazine, an American woman named Moynia Michael got the idea of wearing a red poppy as a symbol of remembrance for the men who served in the war.
She worked very hard every year, trying to get others to wear a poppy in November to show that they remember the ones who fought in the war.
While Monia was thinking about the importance of the poppy in the United States, so was another woman in France named Madame Guerin. She also encouraged the idea of selling silk poppies to others to wear and using the money that they raised to help veterans, people who served in the war.
Soon other countries such as Canada, Great Britain, New Zealand, and Australia began to accept the poppy as a symbol of remembrance every year. Although Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae could not help save his friend and others who died during the Great War so many years ago, his poem continues to remind us about the losses of lives during wartime. When you wear a poppy, think of them.
Please welcome Class 6-1 for their presentation of Pourquoi nous portons un coquillot, including their own artwork.
Why do we wear a poppy?
Je porte un coquelicot pour me souvenir de la paix. Je porte un coquelicot pour me souvenir des soldats dans le ciel.
Je porte un coquelicot pour me souvenir des morts.
Je porte un coquelicot pour me souvenir des survivants.
Je porte un coquelicot pour me souvenir de la bataille.
Je porte un coquelicot pour me souvenir des soldats sur l'eau. Je porte un coquelicot pour me souvenir de leur courage.
Je porte un coquelicot pour me souvenir de leur famille. Je porte un coquelicot pour me souvenir des blessés.
My soldier's name is Stanley Isaac Hillier. In 1916, Stanley left his hometown of High Beach and out on the Burin Peninsula and enlisted in the Royal Naval Reserve. He served in the Navy as a seaman gunner. The seaman gunner is the man who handled the ship's ordnance, torpedoes, and explosives.
He served in World War I on the battle cruiser HMS. He didn't serve in World War II. He was 19 when he joined the Army. He was not underage and was not fighting illegally. He did come home from the war but died 50 years later in 1989.
His regimental number was 2083. His cause of death is unknown, and he was 71 when he died. His burial location is unspecified, and he was born January 3rd, 1897.
Each year, to mark the 2 minutes of silence, we listen to a bugler play The Last Post. This part of the ceremony has a special meaning, and Class 6-3 will now tell us why. Back in the 1700s and 1800s, where battles were fought soldier against soldier on land, there was an officer in charge of the duties of the soldiers for the day called duty officer. The duty officer walked around the area where the soldiers were fighting, inspecting their different areas known as posts.
A musician who played the bugle, which is like a trumpet, followed him around as the officer inspected each area or post. The bugler would play some music to signify that they had inspected that post and they were moving to another one. When the duty officer first started out in the morning, the bugler would play a song called Réveillez, which means wake up in French. At the end of the day, when the duty officer was finished making all the rounds of the different posts and he was finished for the day, the bugler would play a piece of music called The Last Post to signify they inspected the final area.
The bugle calls were played throughout the day as a way for the soldiers to keep track of time as they were doing their various duties.
Sometimes when they heard the call, they were to switch duties. Perhaps it was their turn to stop fighting and enjoy a meal or do some other military activities such as exercising.
Maybe it was their turn to relax and write a letter home, or their turn to sleep. When the soldiers heard the last post and music being played, it signaled to the men on night watch to be alert, and the other soldiers had a final warning before it became dark.
When wars became larger and fighting was no longer just taking place on land, the role of the bugler changed. During the Great War, World War I, in the early 1900s, men were being sent to fight on boats, traveling across the ocean to different countries. The military used of radios improvement communication between different posts, so the bugler was no longer needed to follow around a duty officer. But music can be so significant and meaningful. The military decided to begin a new tradition of having the notes of the last post played at a gravesite of those who died in battle. Men would gather around where they had just buried their fellow officers, and a bugler would play the music. The notes played at an officer's funeral no longer signaled at end of a day in a battle, but also at the end of a soldier's life.
When a war was over, countries that lost so many men during a great war built memorial statues and monuments. On the memorials, the government listed the names of all the people who served in the war and died. When the monument was unveiled for everyone to see and remember, the last post music was played, followed by a moment of silence so people could take a minute to silently remember their loved ones who fought and died for their country.
The traditions continued. Every year we gathered together and remembers those who fought and died for their country. The music that was once used to signify the end of a soldier's day so long ago is now heard as a reminder of so many people who died while fighting for their country. The last post is played, we listen respectfully and thoughtfully and think about how long ago, and even today, people died so that we may live freely.
Please stand for the playing of the last post and 2 minutes of silence. This will be followed by the act of remembrance and a message from Mr. Ross Petton from the Newfoundland Labrador Command.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them. Hello, everyone. Bonjour. My name is Ross Petton, and I am the president of Branch 32 Bay Roberts, Royal Canadian Legion. It is my pleasure to be here with you today to talk about remembrance. I'd like to start by letting you know why the Legion is involved with Remembrance Day. Our organization is responsible for helping to support veterans and their needs. They can be everything from repairs to their homes to getting medical support. In Newfoundland and Labrador, we have more than 4,000 Legion members, many of whom volunteer to distribute poppies across the province in exchange for a charitable donation. Poppy money then goes directly towards helping veterans. Of course, things are a little bit different during this pandemic year. You can show your appreciation and support by wearing a poppy to honor our veterans. I would like to share a bit of information with you about Remembrance Day. As you know, it's an important day each year when we take time to remember our veterans and show our respect to those who have served and who have given their lives for our freedom. Remembrance Day is held every year November the 11th and commemorates Canadians who died in service. The first Remembrance Day was held in 1919 throughout the Commonwealth countries like Canada and Newfoundland, and was originally called the Armistice Day. Eventually the tradition became that on the 11th hour of the 11th day, the 11th month, we come together to mark the signing of the armistice, or an agreement to stop fighting, which ended World War I, or the Great War, as it is sometimes called. An important part of Remembrance Day is the laying of the wreaths on the cenotaphs or war memorials around the province and around the country, and even around the world. During the ceremony, a bugler will play the last post, followed by 2 minutes of silence, followed by the reveille. A bagpiper sometime also plays the lament. When possible, there is also a 21-gun salute. There are prayers and readings and a parade involving veterans, legionnaires, Canadian military members, cadets, and uniformed service officers, such as firefighters and police officers. Each of these traditions is important because they help us to remember the lives of brave young men and went off to war, not knowing if they were returned, and to also recognize the men and women who are current day peacekeepers. It also helps us to think about their families and their sacrifices. Newfoundland has a proud military tradition. Yet certainly many of you are aware of the story of the Royal Newfoundland Regiment and its battles in Beaumont-Hamel, Gallipoli, and Monchy-le-Preux. I have had the opportunity, the honor of traveling to Europe to retrace the regiment's route on the battlefields. The route we follow was called the Trail of the Caribou, because there are caribou monuments erected in honor of our soldiers' sacrifices at each of these sites. Some of you may have also visited the Caribou Monument in Baring Park in St. John's. It was very emotional to stand where so many young Newfoundlanders have stood, fought, and died. These young men were just like you and I, and their lives were changed forever by war. I strongly encourage you to visit the battlefields in France and in Belgium if you ever have the opportunity This is an important pilgrimage for all Newfoundlanders to make at least once in their lifetime. Here are one of the ways you might be able to reach this goal. Each year, the Royal Canadian Legion sponsors a literary and poster contest, which we ask students from across Canada to draw or write poems, essays about remembrance. Winners are selected and get the chance to attend the National Remembrance Day ceremony in Ottawa. In Newfoundland and Labrador, high school participants may also win the opportunity to travel to the battlefields in France and Belgium as part of the Royal Canadian Legion annual pilgrimage to Europe. These students are chosen from their winning entries in the Royal Canadian Legion's literary and poster contest, or in recognition of their accomplishments as Boy Scouts, Girl Guides, Cadets, Junior Canadian Rangers, or members of the Church Lads Brigade. When asked, the former participants said it was an incredible once-in-a-lifetime experience which helped them to better understand and appreciate the sacrifice made by Newfoundland soldiers. So if you have a passion for drawing or writing, I encourage you to learn more about the Legion and its connection to Remembrance Day. You can find information on our website by visiting your local Legion branch. Did you realize that there are many signs around your community to help you remember every day, not just on Remembrance Day? You see Canadian flags, Legion buildings, war memorials or cenotaphs, and people in uniforms. You see peacekeepers on the news some days. You see street signs like Veterans Memorial Highway and the LT Stick Drive, which was named after a man from Bay Roberts who was the very first to enlist in the Royal Newfoundland Regiment in 1941. Did you know that we play the last post outside of the Legion in Bay Roberts every single day at 11 a.m.? So you can see the remembrance is around you every day. Let's be mindful to take time to remember our veterans and to show our respect to those who have served and who have given their lives for our freedom. Please visit our Branch 32 website and Facebook pages to learn more about the Royal Canadian Legion and Remembrance Day. It has been wonderful speaking to you today. It's important that we take the time to talk about remembrance and share the reason why we never forget. N'oublie pas.
Corporal Jamie Brendan Murphy is from Conception Harbor, Newfoundland and Labrador. His parents were Norman and Alice Murphy.
Jamie was ranked corporal. He was 26 years old when he served.
Jamie was part of Operation Athena, Canada's military commitment to the International Security Assistance Force, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization-led mission in Kabul.
Jamie Murphy died during the battle on January 27, 2004. He died due to a suicide bomber with explosives strapped to his body, reportedly jumped on one of two jeeps carrying 6 soldiers on patrol.
Jamie joined Canadian Armed Forces in March 1977. Jamie had also applied to both a trade school and the Army when he was just out of high school. When the Armed Forces replied first, he decided to go that path. Jamie received a Sacrifice Medal and now has a street park and a tree planted in honor of his service. He died a week before the end of his tour and was the first Newfoundland soldier to be killed in the Afghanistan conflict.
We will now present some poetry and artwork created by some of our intermediate students.
The day we honor the fallen. On the 11th month, on the 11th day, my friends and family gather to pray. By the time that the clock strikes 11 o'clock, in silence we pray and nobody talks. Imagine the parents whose daughter or son had joined the war when it had begun. Just think about how they're feeling today, the heartache if their loved one passed away. We thank the soldiers for their courage and service, as we can't imagine how much they were nervous. Bombs were exploding, soldiers kept on hearing those. All of these brave soldiers are really our heroes. Once my parents hand a poppy to me, I'll wear it to thank the soldiers who kept us free. The day we honor the fallen, we want you to know what the soldiers and families had to undergo.
My soldier, I'm thinking all about you. At the end of the day, there is still nothing I can do to be blessed again by the presents you once gave. For all I see is your love I crave. The traits I have because of you creates a better version of me today. It will never be the same with you away.
We remember. To remember is the key to satisfy a grave for all the soldiers who have fallen and now lay. We all remember as soldiers, a tragedy on our shoulders, for all the strong people that fought, in our brains all we think is that thought. Their spirits exist, your bravery is admired, the sacrifices you made, each soul is inspired.
Who have fought and who've fallen. On Remembrance Day, we all stand in silence, remembering those who have fought and who've fallen. But on this day, some people may ask, why is it important and why should we stand? We stand for the heroes, the brave and the strong. We stand for the dead, the old and the young. For those who serve and have served before, all left with the pain, trauma, and scars of war. The ones who fight for the freedom of others, the mothers, the fathers, the sisters, the brothers. The ones who sacrificed everything that they had, just to give others a possible chance. For those who were lucky to make it home safely, so carry the pain and memories not so faintly. So much has been lost at the hands of war, most of us will wonder why and what for. It's important to know all that they have done, so on Remembrance Day we stand in silence. We stand for those who have fought and have fallen.
Always remember. His mother will always remember the worrying prayers and tears. Her baby was gone to fight. It was one of her worst fears. Longing for the day her boy would be home safe, but it's just a memory now, one that still makes her heart ache. His wife will always remember that everyday feeling of dread. Would her true love come home safe? She would cry in her empty bed. Caring for their children, alone while also tending the crops, her hands were all blistered, money was scarce. Would this nightmare ever stop? He will always remember, promising to do his best. Proud to serve his country, but his fear was put to the test. Flashbacks and nightmares of friends not making it through. Guns and bombs, living through hell, but he did it for me and you. I will always remember the sacrifice they all made. Now I wear a poppy in honor of those who in graves are now laid. They gave up everything they had so that today we are still free. Food on our tables, a safe place to live, thankful I'll always be.
Today we will introduce Mr. Thomas Ricketts. Ricketts was the youngest soldier to receive the Victoria Cross Award for bravery.
Thomas Ricketts lived in the Middle Arm White Bay and was ranked in the Army as a sergeant.
Thomas was a pharmacist who served in World War I and Western Front.
Thomas was 17 years old when he served in war.
Ricketts died due to a heart attack on February 10, 1967, 2 months before his 66th birthday. Thomas Ricketts was married to Cecilia Ricketts and had 5 kids. Ricketts had 2 brothers and 1 sister. When he died, Thomas Ricketts was buried in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador.
We are very honored to have received this special video message from the Canadian Armed Forces to present our assembly today. Please take a look.
Canada's military history is more than just dates and battles. our history is people. For more than 100 years, Canada's sailors, soldiers, aviators, and special forces have risked their lives for one common goal: building a better world. Some have served overseas, protecting our allies and upholding the rights and freedoms of others. Some have helped out in their communities in times of need, after fires, floods, or throughout the pandemic. Each one has a unique story.
Veterans Week is a time to remember their service and their sacrifice. A time to remember their selflessness and their unwavering belief in democracy and peace. I'm so honored to share some of their stories with you today. Stories that inspire me to be a better member of the military, a better Canadian, and a better person.
I want you to imagine this. It's 1916. You're a young person full of energy. You've left your family back home in Newfoundland and are now in France, near the village of Beaumont-Hamel. You're ready to fight to bring peace and safety back to Europe. It's July 1st, and you and 800 of your comrades in arms advance towards the front line. You continue to fight as those beside you fall. You keep pressing forward long into the night. The next morning, only you and 67 others from your regiment answer the roll call. 700 brave troops are not with you that morning. Some are missing, some are wounded, and some will never answer the call again. That is the terrible cost of war. Over 62,000 Canadians died in the First World War, including roughly 1,300 soldiers from the Dominion of Newfoundland, who proudly served in their regiment as Newfoundland was not yet a Canadian province.
We remember their incredible sacrifices and the sacrifices of those who were injured or struggled with their mental health when they came home. But we must also recognize that not everyone was allowed to serve equally, like the members of the No. 2 Construction Battalion. In the early years of the First World War, many Black Canadians were denied entry into the Canadian military because of the color of their skin. They refused to take no for an answer, and in 1916, volunteers all, they were allowed to serve as part of a segregated, non-combatant unit in France. Their determination to serve their country despite the biases that they had faced is something we should never forget.
Thankfully, the soldiers of No. 2 Construction Battalion are finally receiving the recognition they were due over 100 years ago. Their story is one of tremendous courage and valor in the face of hate and discrimination. It is an example of the resilience, selflessness, and dedication of those who have fought for our country. And it is a reminder that we still have work to do to fight against racism and injustice here at home.
We must also remember our veterans who served in the Second World War. Soldiers like Warrant Officer Second Class John Robert Osborne, who led his company to recapture Mount Butler during the defense of Hong Kong in 1941. They charged with their bayonets and they seized the summits from the Japanese forces. But by mid-afternoon, they were surrounded and running low on ammunition and supplies. As bullets and grenades rained down on them, John Osborne courageously picked up many of the live Japanese grenades and threw them back at the enemy. But there was one he could not get to in time. He yelled for his platoon to clear the area, pushed his men aside, and threw himself on the explosive. He was killed instantly. His courage saved many lives, and he was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross for his valor.
10 years later, and a few thousand kilometers away, roughly 700 Canadians would help defend a force of 5,000 Chinese soldiers at Kapyong during the Korean War. They were outnumbered, but not outmatched. They fought valiantly, and they persevered. While the Battle of Kapyong was on land, Canadians in Korea also served in the air and on the seas. In the skies, they destroyed enemy jet fighters and transported people and much-needed cargo.
And on the water, sailors like Ted Jamieson, an Indigenous Canadian Armed Forces member from the Six Nations Upper Cayuga Band, helped patrol the coasts, disrupt enemy supplies, and conduct a surveillance. Chief Petty Officer First Class Jamieson was an expert in anti-submarine warfare and deployed to Korea on HMCS Iroquois. He was on board Iroquois when the ship was attacked on October 2nd, 1952. An attack that led to the Royal Canadian Navy's only battle casualties during the Korean conflict. He survived and came home to share his vast knowledge with others as a senior instructor at the artillery school in Halifax.
Shortly after the Korean War, the United Nations launched its first large-scale peacekeeping effort in response to the Suez Crisis. In November of 1956, Canadian forces joined 9 other countries in the Middle East as part of the first United Nations emergency force. Their efforts helped end the crisis and brought peace to the region for the next 10 years. The early 90s, Canadian Armed Forces returned to the Middle East, serving in the Gulf War. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the end of that conflict.
More than 4,000 Canadians served in the Persian Gulf region from 1990 to 1991, including Major Lynn Doucette, an air weapons controller from Ingonish Beach, Nova Scotia. She deployed to the Persian Gulf in 1991 and was posted to an American air base in Turkey. There, she commanded a U.S. airborne warning and control system aircraft. She kept a careful eye on the enemy and reported what she saw on the radar to the generals on the ground. She recommended what actions they should take, but she faced significant barriers as a woman in uniform. Local cultural restrictions at the Turkish air base banned women from entering the operation centers. She was denied her seat at the table due to her gender, but she was undeterred and continued to perform her duty with excellence and bravery. Her work and that of her comrades in arms was the key to maintaining control over the sky during the Persian Gulf War.
We've answered the call time and time again. Following the attacks on September 11, 2001, we began our combat operations in Afghanistan. Over 40,000 Canadian Armed Forces members fought bravely to help the people of that country in their time of need. Besides the dangers of combat, the conditions were harrowing and left lasting scars on many who served. They faced extreme heat, dust storms, and the constant threat of roadside bombs or other explosive device.
158 Canadian military members made the ultimate sacrifice, including Captain Nicola Godard. She was a strong leader and a respected officer who believed in building a better world for others. And she remains an inspiration to those who serve today.
Today, I and other people like me carry on the legacy of those who came before us, working on the ground, in the air, and at sea. Our operations across the globe are all about supporting our allies and partners. And here at home, when disaster strikes, we're always ready to help Canadians in need. No matter what, we find a way to help. We adapt, we learn, and we take on new roles. Because at the end of the day, that's why we joined the Canadian Armed Forces, to defend Canada and Canadians, to do good in the world, to live a life of purpose and meaning.
So whenever you can, I encourage you to reflect on the efforts of our Canadian Armed Forces members, both past and present. Celebrate the lives of those who made it home, who survived to have families and to grow old. Honor those who did not. And remember that today, there are thousands of members who put their lives on the line in defense of our country, our people, and our values. Lest we forget. Thank you.
The soldier we will be talking about is Dr. Clooney McPherson. Clooney was born in St. John's, Newfoundland to Campbell McPherson and Emma Duder.
His rank was colonel. He served in World War I in the battles of Somme 1916, Ypres 1917, Ypres 1918, Langemarck 1917, Pau Capel Cambrai 1917, Lies, Bailleul, Kemmel, Courtrai, France and Flanders 1916 to 1918, Gallipoli 1915 to 1916, and Egypt 1915 to 1916.
Clooney served in the years 1914 to 1918. Clooney did not die in the battle. He died November 16, 1916, at the age of 87.
Clooney returned to private practice in St. John's the year 1904 and was appointed to Registrar of the Newfoundland Medical Board.
He was decorated in May 1915 for his invention of the gas helmet to provide protection against poison gas. Clooney McPherson, March 18, 1879 to November 16, 1966, was physician and the inventor of an early gas mask. After World War I, he served as the president of the St. John's Clinical Society and the Newfoundland Medical Association.
Our traditional ensemble will now perform McPherson's Lament.
To close our assembly today, please stand as Sebastian, Neil, and Felicity share a closing prayer, followed by the Ode to Newfoundland performed by the Grade 6 Choir. Please stand.
Dear Lord, today we honor our veterans, worthy men and women who gave their best when they were called upon to serve and protect their country.
We pray that you bless them, Lord, for their unselfish service, for the hardships they faced, for the sacrifice they made.
We respect them, we thank them, we honor them, we are proud of them, and we pray that you will watch over these special people and bless them with a peace and happiness. Amen.
When
Thank you for joining us for our Remembrance Day Assembly. To those who courageously gave their lives and those who fought bravely today, thank you.
Je vous remercie de vous être joints à nous pour nous sembler de jour de souvenir à ceux qui ont courageusement donné leur vie et à ceux qui se battent courageusement aujourd'hui. Merci.